Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Dr. Quaylen Allen. I'm an assistant professor in the College of Education Studies here, and I am pleased and honored to introduce our keynote speaker for the Donna Attallah Educator Development Academy Summit. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Richard Milner, is a preeminent and internationally known scholar in the field of education. He's also a wonderful mentor and good friend of mine. Dr. Milner is the Helen Faison Endowed Chair of Urban Education, Professor of Education, Professor of Sociology, Professor of Social Work, and Professor of Africana Studies, as well as the Director of the Center of Urban Education at the University of Pittsburgh. Lots of titles, right? Previously, Professor Milner was the Lois Autrey Associate Professor of Education and Associate Professor of Education in the Department of Teaching and Learning and the Department of Leadership, Policy, and Organizations, as well as the founding director of the graduate program, Learning, Diversity, and Urban Studies at the Peabody College of Vanderbilt University. His research, teaching, and policy interests concern urban education, teacher education, African American literature, English education, and the sociology of education. And in particular, Dr. Milner's research examines the practices that support teachers for success in urban schools. Professor Milner's work has appeared in numerous books, journals, professional magazines, and newspapers. He's published 6 single-authored and edited books, including his 2010 bestseller, Start Where You Are But Don't Stay There, Understanding Diversity, Opportunity Gaps, and Teaching in Today's Classrooms, which was awarded the 2012 American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education Outstanding Book Award and the 2011 American Educational Studies Association Critics' Choice Book Award. His most recent book is entitled Race in the Class, Confronting Poverty and Race in Schools, and I would assume that this book will be as much of a bestseller as the previous book was. He's written over 33 book chapters, 42 peer-reviewed journal articles. His work has also appeared in the New York Times, the National Education Association Today, and Education Week. And currently, he's the editor-in-chief of the academic journal titled Urban Education. Dr. Milner is a highly sought-after speaker. This is his 18th presentation of the year so far, and a highly decorated researcher. His CV boasts an array of awards, including the American Educational Research Association 2006 Early Career Award and the 2015 Division K Award for Innovation in the Research on Diversity in Teacher Education. And it's clear that his work is making an impact on the broader field of education. Over the last 3 years, Dr. Milner has appeared on the top 200 EduScholar Public Presence ranking, which is published by Education Week and recognizes university-based scholars in the US who are contributing substantially to the public debate about education. This year, he's ranked number 89. Last year, he was ranked 88, and before that, 95. So hopefully, after his visit here at Chapman, he'll get his rankings up a little higher next year. And then finally, Dr. Milner is a proud husband and father of 4-year-old twin daughters, Anna Grace and Elise Faith, who I'm sure he's missing right now, and I know they keep him pretty busy. But we're thankful that he was willing to travel from Pittsburgh and join us here at Chapman University. And so please help me in welcoming Dr. Richard Milner.
No, wow. I guess I got to try to say something now after that introduction. That was really gracious. You send that bio because you have to write it anyway, and you don't necessarily expect people to read it. It is indeed an honor and a pleasure to be here today. I am humbled by the invitation. Indeed, I know there are lots of folks with whom you have relationships across the country, and to be named, to be called to give the talk really means a lot to me. Sincerely, especially coming from folks I respect so dearly and so deeply. I just want to give a shout out, indeed, for the absolute best AERA party reception of the year. Every year Chapman does it, and I mean, when I say you do it well, right? You do it well. And I look forward to the Chapman party every year. And so I'm grateful to Quaylen for the gracious introduction. I'd also want to take this opportunity to recognize and thank Dr. Kimberly White-Smith, my great colleague here at Chapman University. Susie Suhu, I see her over there. Yep, have some great friends. Keith Howard is there, and wow. Okay, all right, so I am honored to be here. Peter McLaren, others of you here on this great faculty. I'm indeed honored. I'm indeed honored. So I have about 121 slides that I want to get. I'm just kidding. I'm not just kidding. Not a minute. But I do have a lot that I like to say. And in looking at the amount of time I have, I realize that I'm going to have to cut some things a little short. I do have a lot more depth behind a lot of the points I want to make today. But I want to move forward so that we are able to maximize our time. The sort of framing question today really is this one. And it actually emerges from and it draws from the work of one of my mentors, Jackie Irvine. And the question is, how do we help students dream who have only known nightmares? Right? How do we help students dream who've only known nightmares? And in framing this talk and thinking about urban education in particular, I want to sort of have a conversation with you today, if you will, about issues that divide and issues that sort of bring us together. And the first issue that I want to cover really is about testing. Right? It's about testing. And I want to beat a dead horse here. I was on a panel a few months ago, and someone stood and who was much more in support of testing than I would ever be, and said, and here I stand in the George, but it's kind of it's ironic in a lot of ways. And the person said, "What do you have against testing?" And I responded that it's the tests are not evil, right? It's what we choose to use the test for that I have major problems with. And it is unfair for us to blame issues that are far outside of teachers' control. Linda Darling Hammond made a really provocative point. She says, the Reagan era introduced a new theory of reform focused on outcomes rather than inputs. That is, high-stakes testing without investing that drove most policy initiatives. The situation in many urban and rural schools deteriorated over the decades. Drops in real per pupil expenditures accompanied tax cuts and growing enrollment. Meanwhile, student needs grew with immigration, concentrated poverty and homelessness, and increased numbers of students requiring second language instruction and special educational services. Although some federal support to high-need schools and districts was restored during the 1990s, it was not enough to recoup the earlier losses, and after 2000, inequality grew once again. And so the idea that we need to shift our gaze from outcomes to inputs is really the big point related to testing. We need to shift how we think, and we need to shift how we talk about the very nature of testing. You're leaders, you're educational leaders. And so in your conversations, what if we shifted the very ways in which we engage conversations related to what's happening with our students? What if we deliberately chose to rethink how we talked about what's actually happening? What I've come to understand is that we're focusing on too much testing and not enough teaching. Too much testing and not enough teaching. I know I'm right about it. That's right, I said it. And I also want to make it clear. That some of us have started to argue that we actually don't have an achievement gap at all. I know y'all gonna be like, dude, what is he talking about? Just show him the door, right? We don't have an achievement gap at all. What some of us have started to argue and understand is what we really have is a teacher quality gap, and we have a teacher training gap, and an effective leadership gap. We don't have an achievement gap, but what we have is a challenging curriculum gap, and a school funding gap, and a digital divide gap, and a school counseling gap. And we don't have an achievement gap, but what we really have is a wealth and income gap. And what we really have is we have an employment opportunity gap, right? We don't have an achievement gap. What we really have is an affordable housing gap, and a healthcare gap, and a nutrition gap. That's right, I said it. We don't have an achievement gap, but what we have is an instruction gap, right? And we have a school integration gap, and we have a quality childcare gap, and we have a school and pop culture gap. We don't have an achievement gap. What we have is an opportunity gap. That's right. And so if we shifted the very ways in which we talked about the realities of what's happening in schools, we can complexify, we can nuance what's actually happening in schools. What I've come to argue in my work is this: until we penetrate these areas, right, until we really get our heads around ways to systematically design studies and interventions and so forth that support these areas, we're going to find ourselves somewhat in a holding pattern. So point one really is about shifting our focus away from an achievement gap to one that really focuses on opportunity gaps and other gaps, away from deficits to assets, away from equality to equity. So there will be a quiz at the end of my talk. Issue 1 was what? Was about what? What was issue 1 about? I'm going to go back to the first slide. So the first one was about our obsession with testing, right? Our obsession with, so you got to pay attention. You got to pay attention. All right? So issue 2. Issue 2 really is about socioeconomic status and poverty. If you look at these data show the relationship between high school completion, but between education and earnings, right? So if you look at these data, you see the relationship there from 2000 to 2010. This next slide actually shows over a career span. These are self-reported data. If you will. I was giving a talk, I think in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and there was a teacher who raised her hand and she said, "I have a master's degree. I don't make anywhere near 100, and I won't make anywhere near what you're saying." What are you saying? These are national data, right? These are data that are taken across different areas of employment. These data show you poverty guidelines. So you see, I always look at a family of 4 there. Are y'all able to see that? See it really clearly? Right. So if one earns in 48 states $23,551, that family is not eligible for federal support and state support. So how do people get to be successful in this work and in this life? I want to talk now briefly about this notion of meritocracy. And meritocracy is the idea that folks are awarded based mostly or solely on their ability, their performance, and their talents, right? There are various mindsets that shape this folks who embrace meritocracy. Mindset 1. All groups of people were born with the same opportunities. And if students or people just work hard and put forth effort and follow the law, then like a formula, they'll be successful. And then we give examples of folks who've done it, right? Well, that Oprah Winfrey did it, right? Mindset 2. If students do not succeed, it is because they're not working hard enough, not because of other factors that might fall outside of their control. Voices of teachers. One teacher said, "I get so sick of people," she was actually talking about me, "making something out of nothing. My grandparents immigrated to the U.S. country with nothing, and they made something of their lives because they worked hard. But I am mindful of what curriculum theorist Beverly Gordon stated very succinctly. She said, "It is difficult, and don't miss this, to critique the world and work to change it when the world works for you." Amen, Beverly. Amen, Beverly. Another teacher said, I'm going to be the kind of teacher who follows your advice and have high expectations. If a student is not turning in his homework on time, I'm not going to give any slack. It's going to be a 0 in my grade book. And there's no conception of why the student is not turning in his homework on time. What does money bring? What does money bring? Trust funds established and passed down from one generation to the next. When I was at Vanderbilt, one of my good colleagues he asked me to give him a ride to CarMax. Y'all have CarMax out here? Yeah, okay, so he give me a ride. I guess y'all do have CarMax. Right? So he said, give me a ride after school, after we get off today, to take me over. My family, we're gonna get a new minivan. So I was like, cool, give me a ride to CarMax. We jump in the car, and as we're driving, my wife at the time was a State Farm agent, and I don't know if you know this, but State Farm does more than house loans. They also do mortgages. They also do car loans, right? So as we're driving, I'm like, what kind of interest rate you gonna get on that thing, man? Because I'm trying to get my wife a loan, right? I'm just putting it out there. I'm trying to get her a loan. So as we're driving, I feel him frowning as we're drowning, frowning at me. And I'm like, why are you, what's the deal? He was like, don't you know that cars depreciate as soon as you drive off the lot? It's like, yep, I understand that. He said, I would never take a loan out on a car. He said, we pay cash for our vehicles. So at the time, the car was about $26,000, I suspect. And he had been at Vanderbilt 1 year longer than I, and our salaries better have been somewhere around the same. Yep. When you think we should be making somewhere in the same ballpark. All right. But what I came to understand in that moment more deeply than I had ever understood before is that he had a trust fund, right? That had been passed down to him one generation to the next. And so when we talk about this notion of playing field, right, we really have to problematize, you teachers. You hear me? You get what I'm saying? You follow me what I'm saying, right? So how many of you are sports folks out there? Sport people who are into sports. All right, not very many, so I'm going to have to really do some to really work at this. Okay, so it's like, follow me here, all right? So it's like being born on third base and thinking you hit a triple. You get it, right? So, in the midst of my honoring the fact that he was in a position to pay cash for his vehicle, we have to be mindful that folks experience life and their experiences, of course, are shaped by a range of issues far outside of what we might quote unquote earn. What else? Property. Finance college education without having to solicit student loans. When I moved to that's right, I said it, the Ohio State University to pursue my doctorate. That's right. My mom continued to mail me these care packages in the mail, right? So Quaylen, they would have like cheese and crackers, and then I got bold, and eventually I said, Mama, stop sending me these care packages. What I really need is money, right? But she continued mailing those care packages, right? We're in different spaces. I grew up in the segregated South. Private and independent school tuition. I consulted with one of the wealthiest schools in the state of Tennessee, and when students hit 8th grade, they start being able to enroll in ACT prep courses. It's a part of the curriculum, right? And then we have a nerve to compare the outcomes on those exams with students who are not exposed to those kinds of privileges, right? Private and tutoring in academic subjects. What else? Exposure to different cultures and languages. Financial support with graduate assistance and so forth. Kaplan courses, and this is the real talk. When I was at the Ohio State University, I didn't know what a Kaplan course was until I started my doctoral studies. I didn't, right? No one told me that you could go get a prep course to boost your GRE scores. Didn't know it. Vacations and getaways, both domestically and so forth, and zone school systems and the like. So on a classroom level, teachers need to be aware that factors far beyond merit give people their positions in society, and moreover, if the meritocracy argument were accurate, we know from a sociological perspective that merit would determine who gets to go to college, right? But family income is the strongest predictor. Family income is the strongest predictor. The more money families earn, the more likely, of course, their children are to go to college. So what was issue 1? Obsession with all right, okay, all right. And issue 2 was about what? Socioeconomic status and poverty. So in thinking about issues that divide. The third issue is really that I want to share is about counseling and psychological services. When I was conducting research for Start Where You Are, there was a robbery. Y'all got to stick with me because my wife says I tend to give too many details. So if I give, if you get it and if you kind of understand what I'm saying, kind of smile at me and agree. But if you don't, I'm going to keep giving details because that's what good teachers should do, right? You want people with you, right? All right, you with me so far? All right, so there was a robbery when I was conducting research in a middle school. There was a robbery that had been committed in the neighborhood convenience store about 400 feet from the front of this middle school. The robbery was committed by high school students, not middle school students. I was conducting research in the middle school, you got me? But the feeder school, 2 of the students from the feeder school and the high school committed this robbery. So far, so good. All right, so, and this was a mom and pop shop. The husband and wife literally opened the store in the morning. They closed the store in the evening. They had their meals there. They spent a lot of their time there. This was the store that the middle school students would stop as they walked to school to get those Doritos and Now Laters and, right, those things that drive teachers crazy, right? So after the robbery, so the high school students and a high school student, a 16-year-old, shot and killed the store clerk. Well, this happened on a Thursday. I was due back into school to do observations the following week. And so when I arrived on campus, on the bus yard, guess what the students were still talking about? You can say it. What do you think? The shooting, right? They were talking about, oh, y'all gonna make me work. Help me, all right? So they were talking about the robbery on the bus yard. In the corridors, the students were talking about the robbery, right? But in the classroom, there was no mention, right? So students were still whispering, talking about the robbery. They were passing notes. In the cafeteria, during in the cafeteria, when the students were having lunch, the students were still engaging conversations about the robbery, posing questions like, I wonder where they got the gun. I wonder how many years they're gonna get. All these kind of questions that were in their hearts and in their minds, right? So as a part of my reciprocity for conducting research for Start Where You Are, I conducted professional development with the teachers, right? So, and about a week later, I was scheduled to do a PD session with the teachers. So when I walked into the library, one of the first questions I posed, there were about 32, 33 people in the room, and I just posed a question. I said, hey guys, this robbery took place around the corner. I'm just wondering why there was no discussion or even a site for curriculum possibilities related to the robbery, right? And when I tell you the folks in that room ganged up on me, one after the other, and I was like, dang, I thought we were cool. I thought we had developed a relationship. One after the other, they gave me reasons why it was completely inappropriate for them to engage the robbery. And I want to be clear. I understand that it was a tricky space. What's some of what you think I heard? What do you think I heard? What are some feedback you think I believe I may have gotten from some of the teachers in the room, the educators? Why not robbery? Jump in. It's inappropriate for their age range, right? Are you kidding me? Yep, heard that. What else? Encouraging more robbery. Yes, I heard that, right? If we bring up the robbery, then we romanticize it. I heard that. Yes. They have no time for discussion. Now you're going to the neighborhood, right? Because when they said when one person you're getting close. I don't want to give it away. All right. So anything else you can think of, real quick. Anybody else? Anybody? Yes. Absolutely. Yep. Heard that as well. Anybody else? Yes. Yes. Absolutely heard that, Keith. Absolutely. Yes. Did the teachers feel ill-equipped to handle any emotional breakdown? Got that? Absolutely. Now, I am a math teacher. How dare you? Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. So we don't have a lot of. Okay. We don't have, so when one teacher said the robbery won't show up on the test, folks in the room said, yeah, right. And to be honest, I don't mean to critique the teachers or to sort of vilify the teachers and their experiences, right? That was a part of their own reality, these accountability measures and so forth. But what's really telling to me is the ways in which it was dismissed, even though it was so salient to the students' experiences and so forth. And then there was a guy who, if I set my computer up on this side of the library, he sat on the opposite end of the library with his arms folded, right? If I set my computer up on this side of the library, he sat on the opposite end of the library, as far away from me as he possibly could. And I always take showers, so I don't know what the deal was, right? And he would sit with his arms folded, right? And so on this day, he never said one word for the 2 hours that I was in the school. He never said one word to me the entire time I had been conducting research and doing the PD. And he broke his silence. He said, and furthermore, and I was like, come with it, buddy, because I'm not scared. Come with it. He said, furthermore, I teach math and science. What does a robbery, and building on Keith's point earlier, what does a robbery have to do with my teaching math and science, right? And so I had to really step back and say, well, I have not done a great job. Because part of my job was to try to help them be responsive to the realities of their students. So I take full responsibility. I said, well, let's think about it for a moment. So crime had been a concern in the community in general. And I said on a very basic level, I said, you could count the distance between streetlights, right? and guesstimate the distance between streetlights and to look at the relationship, perhaps, between well-lit communities and those that aren't. I said, but what if you go a little bit deeper? I said a lot more, but I want to get to the point, right? I said, what if you went a little bit deeper? I said, what if you had the students count the number of liquor stores in their community? And look at the relationship between violence and, let's say, substance abuse or access to alcohol. Is there some math in that? Is there a little bit? Where are my math folks? A little bit. Is there a little bit of math? Okay, because the others of y'all are looking like, I don't know. Maybe there's some math in there. All right. So I said, what if you counted the number of gun shops in the community, right? I said, and look at the relationship between access, exposure to gun shops, and then you can also have them compare those access points to suburban, perhaps more affluent communities. There's some math in that, right? And I said, but moreover, we could talk for days. I said, what if the math teacher actually had a conversation with the English language arts teacher? Imagine that. Imagine if the math teacher talked to the language arts teacher, right? And moving beyond sort of this, moving up, to areas of social action. What if the students constructed a letter? At the time, the police chief was Ronald Surpass. And they wrote a letter saying, "Dear Mr. Police Chief, we are tired of the robberies, the crime that's being committed in our community." And then do some research. Over the last 3 years, we found, gathering data to substantiate the number of the patterns and so forth. And then also outline some solutions, some recommendations in terms of how they might be able to, those outside the community and those with authority might be able to support changing and transforming those communities. That's the kind of work that is potentially transformative, because the students are not then, the students are then moving to spaces of activism and not only sort of embracing the realities of crime or whatever in their communities, but perhaps most importantly, what's really interesting about what was told, what I heard from the teachers, is that those students were just expected to just deal with the fact that they had experienced robbery. And we often look at and we often think, when I tell this story, people often wonder, or they think that I'm talking about the remorse students felt for the shooters. And that's not the case. What I found just by asking the students, they told me that they were mourning for the loss of the husband and wife team. They were mourning because they had developed a relationship. These were folks they interacted with every day. But when we have conversations like when the young lady said, that falls outside of my skill set, right? I'm not equipped to respond to that part of who students are. Shame on us. Shame on us, right? Because those students are struggling. Those students need, and they actually deserve, your grown self. That's right, I said it. When you're experiencing traumatic experiences, don't you need to work through those experiences? So when the student comes in and tells you to kiss his ass, they're doing it for a reason, right? And if they really meant that, they probably wouldn't show up, right? But responding to the humanity of who folks are. Most teachers across the country are not trained. They don't have experiences in dealing with traumatic experiences. And so our students show up day in and day out in schools that are underprepared to respond to those aspects of who they are. Shame on us. 1 in 5 schools across this country lacks a guidance counselor. 1 in 5 schools. And then look at these data. When you think about the different contexts, the places where one might think counseling, psychological services might be most beneficial are the very places that are proportionately under-resourced. Shame on us, shame on us, shame on us. So issue 1 was what? Obsession with testing. Look, some of y'all looking like, I don't want to get in trouble. All right, obsession with testing. Issue 2 was about what? Socioeconomic status. Issue 3? Counseling. So if you can say anything else, he talked about, you can at least say that. All right. And then the 4th issue that I want to talk about really is about race, the R word. And folks get real uncomfortable when we have conversations about race. What is it? Can I move?
Yeah.
May I move?
Oh, you know what?
May I move? She said I move. All right. So what is it about this thing called race? Oh, okay. Sorry. Thanks. What is it about this thing called race that makes it so difficult for us to engage? Why is it so hard to have conversations about race? We don't have a lot of time, but let's move quickly. What do you think? What do you think? What is it?
You don't want to say the wrong thing.
Right. Right. If I say something, absolutely. Right. Okay. Other comments? Yes. Here, you go here.
We have to acknowledge our own privilege.
All right. So it means. All right. So it means that we have to reflect and bring ourselves to the. Okay. All right. Yeah. Jump in here. Yes.
I was going to say something about positionality.
Yeah. Okay. Positionality. Others. Yes.
But what others think? Like when you put yourself out there, what do they think of you?
Right. There's a place of vulnerability that one has to. Absolutely. Right. Yeah. I mean, I often I feel badly sometimes because when I've been watching a lot of Steve Harvey's Family Feud. How many of y'all been watching Family Feud now that Steve Harvey? Like that is the best show now that Steve Harvey has taken over. Right? And I find myself like feeling horribly, right? Because when I reflect, I always want the black family to win. I admit it. Like I'm like, man, I hope the black family wins. I don't care who they're playing against. I want the black family to win. And I like reflect on it. I feel horrible about it, right? But at least I'm being honest, right? What else? What else about this thing called race? Yes. Yeah. To divide, hence our talk, right? Okay. Yeah. Jump in. I thought you did. Okay. Anybody else? Yes.
Sometimes when you're in a group where some people had a lot of experience talking about it and you haven't, you kind of feel like you shouldn't.
Right. Yeah. I got you. Okay. Had we more time, we would spend a lot more time actually teasing out this. But some of us claim that we're colorblind, right? We if we're seeing beings, we're probably not being honest if we say that. But mindset one: if I acknowledge that the racial or ethnic background of my students or myself, then I may be considered a racist. Mindset two: if I admit that people experience and see the world differently, I may be seen as politically incorrect. I may offend others, such as my colleagues or my students, if I express my reservations about race. But we know, for instance, that race matters in this obsession, when we're obsessed with test scores. We know something is happening, let's say if we're looking at patterns in test score data. We know that. I walk into schools and across the country, and I can conjecture what my experience is going to be like when I walk in and the principal or the superintendent or the assistant principal says to me, the issue really is not about race. It's about socioeconomic status, right? But we know even when we hold constant for race, we know that students of color still, black and brown students in particular, still tend to underperform in comparison to their white counterparts. Mindset three: I should treat all my students the same, regardless of who they are, what their home situations are, or what their experiences related to race happen to be. On a classroom level, it is essential, and I know you all know this, but I stop by to remind you that you do your work in a race-conscious fashion, right? I'm a lot of things. I'm somebody's husband, somebody's daddy, somebody's son, but I'm also a black man. And my experiences are shaped by my being a black man, right? Nobody knows when I'm in the airport that I'm going to Chapman University, getting ready to give a talk. I'm a black man, right? And so in your life world, in your experiences, if it works for you, right, not having to think about it, that can't be enough. You've got to be mindful that the students with whom you are working are experiencing a raced world that shapes their worldview, that shapes their interactions, that shapes the ways in which they interpret and come to the curriculum and the like. Adoption of a colorblind sort of ideology or way of being, it makes it difficult for us to recognize not only micro-level issues that happen in your classroom, but it makes it difficult to recognize that there is an over-representation of students of color in special education. There's an underrepresentation of students of color in gifted education. There's an over-referral of African American students to the office, even proportionally. I'm going to show you y'all data here in a little while. An overwhelming number of African American students suspended and expelled. And some believe that it is the students themselves and not the systems that cause students to experience these negative situations, right? So issue 1 was about what? Obsession with test scores. Issue 2? Socioeconomic status. Issue 3 was about what? Counseling and psychological services. Issue 4 was about race. All right, issue 5 is about who should teach our children, right? And how they should be prepared. Who should teach our students and how should they be prepared? If you look at these data give you a sense in 2011 and 2012 of the teaching demography, racial demography there, you see it? These are a little bit more precise. I didn't like the first one because the pie chart wouldn't let me do, so I wanted to give you the actual numbers, right? A little bit more precise. I'm going to move a little bit faster, but if you want these slides, send me a note. New teachers, you see there? You see the trends? You see what's happening? Are y'all studying them? You getting it? Are you? You see it? Okay. This is Orange County. That's 2011. This is Orange County 2013, 2014. And then across the country, in terms of student demography, this is what we have, what we see. Okay. This is in Orange County. If this looks confusing to you, if I were you, I would look in the center, the percent total. You see the percent total there? All right. English language learners and free and reduced students, and these are not combined. These data are different. The top bar is for the state. The blue one is for Orange County in particular, for the county. What I want to share now is I want to talk just a bit about a project related to some work we're doing at the University of Pittsburgh. By the way, Dean Larry Davis, the Dean of Social Work at the University of Pittsburgh, this is actually his idea, so I want to make it clear that it doesn't come off that it's my idea, this Dean Davis's idea. We should give credit where credit is due. But Dean Davis we've actually begun starting a program now where every one of our teachers will be certified, will have some level of exposure, not certified, some level of exposure to social work and counseling, right? And that's in terms of how we prepare teachers, that has to be a part of what's happening, right? Has to be a part. I want to talk about the Ready to Learn, Ready to Teach program. I could go through the methodology with you, but I don't think you really care about the methodology. I really want to just give you some big bullets, some big themes here, because my heart, the longer I do this, Susie, folks are trying to pull me away from my heart, which is teacher prep. And they want me to have these macro level conversations. And you're beyond that. You should now be talking about policy. And I keep getting pulled back to this is my center. This is who I am. So what we've done is we have recruited students. We don't have an undergraduate teacher education program, but we understand the necessity to be on the front lines of recruiting folks into teaching who have the orientation, the positioning to want to teach in urban, especially high poverty environments. So we have, this is what you're gonna observe is just a small clip of 14 undergraduate students from across different disciplines in the arts and sciences. 6 of them have already decided that they're going to move into teaching, right? 8 students are undecided. One student told me just the other day that she absolutely is not going into teaching, so stop trying. So, well, that's fine. We need to know that, right? I'm glad you told me because I don't want you in the classroom if you don't really want to be there. We pair those students with 2 to 3 student high school freshmen in one school. Their job is to work to prepare to enhance those students' academic capacities in both mathematics English language arts, and I'm still struggling for the third way to categorize this, but social development is the way we're talking about it now. All students, high school students and undergraduate, are paid a very generous, thanks to a donor. Where is Donna Ford Attallah? Very generous. Let's give her a hand. It's folks like Donna who allow us to do the work we do, and I'm very grateful to you. I really am. But the students are paid, both the undergraduate students as well as the high school students are paid a generous stipend. We got a lot of pushback, related. I don't know if you know the work of Roland Fryer, who's the economist at Harvard, who they were talking about, pay for performance and so forth. And my big takeaway was I didn't want students who had, this is a high poverty environment. I didn't want students to have to choose between enhancing their academic and social development and going and mowing lawns or shoveling snow. I'm sorry. So we pay them to be there. Pitt students are there in the classroom and work with students after school 2 days a week. So the students are our undergraduate students, right, are in the classrooms with their mentees, working with those students, but they also are often work with other students in the class as well. 2 days a week, and then they work with the students out after school and tutoring and so forth. They work during lag periods, so these dedicated students also work during spring break, Thanksgiving, summer. We're going to have a very intense program this summer with them as well. And what we're doing is we're studying every aspect of this learning and development, and I can tell you more about that later. So there are lots of big lessons you can learn from this. I realize I don't have a lot of time, so what I did was I pulled some big themes out from this, and I wanted you to kind of get a sense of some of what's happening. All right, y'all with me? One point I really want you to take away from this is who's doing the teaching. Right? I don't know if you noticed there was an African American gentleman, an African American woman, and a white woman who all sat sort of in the center. Did you see, right? Those are community members. Right? And so we are relying on community members to really help us contextualize and historicize the nature of the community, but also the school, right? And I've really tried to move away in my work from focusing in on the deficits. If you read my work, that's one of the big themes of it, right? But this video was just taken about 3 weeks ago. So this is not some archaic, back in the day, this is what happened, students didn't have enough desks. This is happening today, right? It's happening today. And it's acceptable because it's black and brown children in that school. That's why we allow it to happen, because I can tell you that if these were rich, wealthy white children in that school, things would be very, very, very different. They'd be very different. Okay, so to be clear, teachers from any racial or ethnic background can be successful with any group of students. So if you read Start Where You Are, that's one big theme, right? I make it clear that it doesn't matter what your racial and ethnic background, but it's not because you have a brown friend, right? It's because you build a skill set to be responsive in that way. Does that make sense? Right? So teachers have to build a skill set. What the literature talks about it like this: there's a demographic divide, is the way they talk about it, right? And the question is, do student test scores, this is how it's framed, increase if they have a teacher who is similar or the same to their own ethnic background? It's ethnic matching. Does that make sense? So that's how the literature sort of talks about it. But who leaves teaching? From a historical perspective, African American teachers went into teaching pre-DSEG, and they entered the teaching profession at large rates, right? Because it gave them entree, for many of them, into the black middle class. Right? It was a very respectable field. My mom owned a beauty salon when I was growing up. And I remember walking into the beauty salon. Thursday, for some reason, was the day that the teachers got their hair done, right? And I remember walking, what was it about Thursday? But they were all in the beauty, and so they were walking, and I remember there was a level of reverence that people placed on teachers and on teachers. When the teacher walked in, people paused, right? They looked to them as community members in lots of ways. We know that Posty said many black and brown teachers were demoted. They were fired. They were placed outside of their own communities. And eventually they moved into other career paths. So, so why do teachers leave? Why do teachers of color leave? I want to talk just very briefly here about some of what we know from the literature. One area that's talked about is stereotype threat. Josh Aronson, Claude Steele talk about this. Another is about microaggressions. Right? A third, overwhelming invisible work. When I moved to Pitt, I thought my life was going to be a little bit different, right? And I show up on campus, the student athletes show up, and the folks in arts and sciences show up, and the black students from Africana studies show up. I'm like, how did y'all know I was here? They show up and they find you wherever you are, right? And I don't say, here's the door. I don't show them the door. You do the work because they need you. They're expecting you. They want me to, students outside of the discipline sometimes want you to advise them. I'm like, I can't advise you on courses you take, but they feel that level of connectedness with me. And eventually it becomes taxing, right? It becomes taxing. And people start to experience racial battle fatigue. In terms of racial microaggressions, my colleagues, Howard and others wrote, microaggressions can be defined as brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial slights and insults towards people of color. Someone, when I was at the University of Minnesota, I guess a couple of months ago, talked about it like this. He said it was like paper cuts, experiencing those constant paper cuts. Right? One student at a predominantly white school, when I was conducting my dissertation research, he put it like this. He said, and this is a student, his father is a medical doctor. He's in a blue ribbon school, right? But he talks about his experiences in his community when he goes to the local mall. He says, that shit gets on my nerves. These damn white people follow me around the stores like I'm gonna steal the clothes off their backs. The white boys are in the store and nobody's checking them. It's the brothers they're following around, The shit gets old. I'm sick of it. I've been working since I was 12 and saving, and I can buy whatever I want in these damn stores. But it's because I'm a brother, they checking every move I make. A student in the very same school put it like an African-American female student put it like this. She says, it's like whenever I say something in class, the teacher is like, well, that's interesting. But when a white student says the same thing or makes the same point, she's like, that's a great point. I'm thinking, well, that's exactly what I just said. She always does that, so I just stopped participating in class because I'm tired of it. Fannie Lou Hamer put it this way. She says, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so you might say, self, I'm not doing these things. These are not things that I'm doing. These are not things that I'm contributing to. But quite often what happens is these experiences are taking place for students and you never know it. And so having that open access and that open opportunity for students to be able to talk with you about what's happening, I think, is really important. Again, it becomes taxing. This is why teachers leave. All right, how much time do I have? Like 10 seconds? 15 minutes. All right, so how should we do this work? What I want to do now quickly is, it really is about connecting with students, building the curriculum instruction in these relational aspects as well. Take a look at these data. These data make compelling insight, provide compelling insights, I would say, about the ways in which students are engaging social media. Look at that. These were taken in 2013. Look at this. And this is from a classroom that I recently visited in 2013. The teacher says no food, no drink, no cell phone. Don't bring any electric devices into this classroom. Right? We've got to do better, y'all. We've got to do better. We've got to do better. All right, so I want to play a quick game with you. All right, so this is going to be Team A. Where are y'all? Team A over here. All right, raise your hand, Team A. All right, some of y'all back there. Okay, Team B. All right, Team B. My money's on Team A. Okay. All right. So you have to name the artist and you have to name the song. Okay, the artist and the song. You got it? You ready? Okay. Here we go. Come on, Team A. Ready? Just yell it out. Name of the song. What was it? Justin Bieber, Baby. All right, Justin Bieber, Baby. All right. So I didn't hear anybody on this side of the room. So it's 2-0. 2-0, okay? All right, what about this one? Just shout it out. You better shout it out. All right, what about this one? Okay, so that one was T.I. You can have whatever you like, right? You gotta work at it. Okay, so it's 4-0. Good job. Okay. What about this one? You better pay attention. You're talking. Taylor Swift, 15. You never heard this? You never heard this? Because when you're 15, somebody tells you they love you. You're gonna believe it. That's right. Many talents. Many talents. So now it's 6-0, but you can catch up. You can do it. You can be almost as good as they, but you've got to really work hard, okay? All right, are you motivated? Okay, we're gonna see. All right, so good job. It's 6-0. 6-0, all right. By the way, I was somewhere giving a talk, and I was saying my wife loves country music, and we went to the, who was it? Carrie Underwood concert. I think we were the only black people in the whole place. And so this lady kept raising her hand, and she was like, oh, no, she wanted to ask a question, but she felt embarrassed. I was like, ask it. It could be something that all of us could benefit from. And so she eventually said, is your wife white? Because I told her we had gone to the Taylor Swift. Don't make assumptions, right? Black people like Carrie Underwood too. Black people like that. All right, here we go. Ready? Mrs. Officer, there you go. Oh. Okay, that was Mrs. Officer Lil Wayne. Did y'all know that one? Wee. Okay, my literacy folks, what is that a great example of? What literary element? What is it? What's it a great example of? Onomatopoeia, right? Look at y'all. Okay, let me find out. Y'all know something. I can't believe it. All right, so it's 8, and I'll give you half a point. 8 to 0.5, okay? All right, last one. Black Eyed Peas, I got a feeling, right? Black Eyed Peas, I got a feeling. All right, okay. So it's 10 to 0.5. I'm really proud. Let's give Team A a hand, Team B. What just happened? What just happened? One of the things that I know for sure is the teachers set the tone for the space, right? And so my belief from the very beginning, there's research that talks about self-fulfilling prophecy, right? My belief in the very beginning really shaped in some ways the ways in which I heard and the ways in which I allowed you to participate. But good job overall, even though you only got 0.5 points. All right, so I want to move now just very briefly before I take my seat to what practices in districts and schools and classrooms seem to really be pervasive um, and to be responsive to meeting the needs of students. In Pittsburgh, what I came to understand, because I met with lots of folks and they rarely could tell me the positive aspects or the positive uh, institutions and so forth embedded in Pittsburgh. And very quickly I was able to identify these assets that are already in place in Pittsburgh. And the ways in which we network and work together is something different. Right? What else do we need to do? We need to increase the number of adults in every classroom. Pedro Noguera makes this clear in his work, right? It's this note, he talks about students in New York City who are struggling the most, right? Some students are homeless. In fact, he talks about students who have to leave school early some days to get in line to get a bed some evenings, right? But what he says is those students succeed, and success is loosely defined here, right? But they show up and they participate, and they're successful on other academic measures as well. But what he says is there's typically a lead teacher in every classroom. There's an assistant lead teacher. There's a social worker. There's sometimes a community member in that classroom. And when I make that recommendation, people look at me like I'm nuts, especially economists. Right? But from a moralistic perspective, we can build more jails. Right? We can figure out ways to fuel and to feed the prison industry, right? Political economy, right? And yet we can't find ways to support students in this way. So this is not rocket science. Quaylen and Kim, I know you were wanting me to give you something that is, we know these things. We refuse to do them. We do. We refuse to do them. Increasing the number of adults in every classroom. What else should we do? Make sure that every teacher in every school is a teacher of English language arts, language and literacy. Okay? Because those skills are transferable to other academic domains. What else? Provide continual study skill courses and opportunities. What I found in my work when I was studying for race in the class, I found that many students had a very difficult time. I'd be in classrooms and students were in social studies classrooms and they were trying to write down everything that the teacher was saying, right? I mean, just making, the reality is sometimes students struggle with and are not able to, no one has taught them how to do school in that way. So teaching those organizational skills. Providing preparation for substitute teachers is the other component. Proportionally, I can give you the data, right? In schools with black and brown folk, teachers are absent more often, right? And the big takeaway is substitute teachers show up, right? With great intentions, but are often grossly underprepared to meet the needs of students. And for students we know the difference a teacher can make, and for students who are constantly experiencing substitute teachers, and teaching, that's something that we've got to do. We've got to radically reform in-school suspension. Radically reform in-school suspension. Have y'all been to in-school suspension lately? It's embarrassing what happens in many of these places. So we say keep students in school, but we want to keep students in school so that they're learning, that they're experiencing, not in some prison-like cell away from the mainstream of the classroom. These in-school suspension spaces, in many places, not saying in all, but in places that I've visited, are embarrassing at best. Mentoring programs, both inside and outside of school, providing family support mechanisms, right? So for families who are struggling with finances, or families who need health care, families who want to build English language arts skills and so forth, creating spaces where the school is the center for those areas is the point here. Recommendations. What else? Understanding and responding to neighborhood conditions. So one of the Ready to Learn undergraduate scholars reported that she was late the first period. Her mentee was one of her mentees was late the first period every day. So she had a conversation with the student. What she found out was the student had to take 2 buses to get to the school. Sometimes the bus was late, right? So, and then we just expect for 15-year-olds to just kind of figure it out. Right? I probably would have never shown up if that had been my experience in school. Most of us, right? We've got to rethink and reform the inflexible and the narrow curriculum. Even though research would suggest that narrowing or reducing class size doesn't necessarily increase student test scores. For students who are school dependent, it can be the difference maker. So we need to reduce class size. And I tried to tease these out in a much more profound and complex way in this book, Race in the Class. Now, what else do I think you should be reading? From an historical perspective, because I study Black folk, I think from an historical perspective, reading Souls of Black Folk and the Miseducation of the Negro, in terms of making the case, these 2 books here, if you are ever in a space where folks say, show me the numbers, this Munin text is outstanding, right? Because it demonstrates how racism is still pervasive. It talks about everything from neighborhood conditions related to lead poisoning in particular communities and so forth, and the like. From an interdisciplinary perspective, read this book by Michelle Alexander, where she talks about the prison political economy. In terms of race and language, many of you have heard about Sonia Nieto's The Light in Their Eyes. This Latinization of U.S. schools is outstanding by Jason Irizarry. He'll be giving a talk at Pitt here soon. In terms of language among African American children, the Perry text is outstanding. Some students are going to succeed in spite of you, and some students are going to succeed because of you. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Oh, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And we didn't even connect on our talk, so thank you for reinforcing some of the things that we